take a seat.
This year is very special for all of us, as China marks the 30th anniversary of its reform and opening up. And the whole world is now experiencing tough times because of the financial tsunami. My question is, what advice do you have for China as the largest developing country goes into the next 10 to 30 years of development? And under the current world economic circumstances, how can China and ASEAN, of course including Singapore, cooperate well to deal with the financial crisis facing us? Thank you very much.
That is a very large question, and the answers are not so easy to give. What will happen after this crisis? Will China go back on the same path? Will the factories that have closed reopen? People go back to the old factories? Or have the old factories that the Hong Kongers and the Taiwanese are closing are gone forever? And new factories will come doing new products which require higher skills, better educated workers with knowledge of computers, robotics, mathematics, etc. I cannot say, because I think the life cycle of products have become shorter, and the companies that have closed down their factories, Hong Kong companies have closed down their factories in Shenzhen. I'm told there are about 30,000 of them that were closed down. They may never reopen. If they go back, they'll probably go back to do logistics, because Hong Kong has decided to abandon or to give up manufacturing and go in for logistics and services. We have not decided to do that because Hong Kong has got the mainland and they can service the mainland. We believe we require a manufacturing industry to provide the jobs, because logistics and services cannot give the numbers in jobs. So if China wants to keep her manufacturing alive, and she will have to do that because of the numbers of population that joins the workforce every year, then she has to upgrade her workers and attract new investments, more capital intensive, more skill intensive. Can she do that? I think she can. Can she do that as easily as the early stages? No, it's not so easy, because the second stage is always more difficult. I mean, we went through that phase, so we know. The first phase was an easy one. You just go assembly line, click, 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 you get your pay, you go to the canteen, and you're finished. After that, you've got to go for special training to do flat screen TVs or computer chips or whatever. And this is a process which China will have to explore and find out who are willing to come, invest, and bring these skills and this technology to China. That's the second phase. And of course, you also begin to build up your services. I was reading one piece yesterday in the Time magazine about a Guangdong lady who started her own PR firm. She was a farmer's daughter. She's now in Guangzhou or Shenzhen and doing PR, and very able woman, and hiring a small staff. But that does not create a number of jobs that China must have. Your PR firm can employ 10, 20, 30, 40 people. But a factory will employ 10, 20, 30,000 people. So that's where China has to go. Eventually, when she's reached that stage, then she will have to go to one stage further, where she begins to invest and, like the Japanese, produce new products, innovate. Walkman, flat screen TVs, or digital cameras, or whatever. The Japanese have invented them, have innovated. I mean, they did R&D, and any group of photographers, I mean, here, you can see they're all carrying Japanese cameras. There are a few Zeiss and German or Kodak. But the market is a Japanese market. Cell phones would have been all Japanese, but the Koreans butted in, and Nokia, the Finns butted in, and they have a challenge there. But in the end, I think the Japanese will triumph, because the content of that cell phone, the computer content, that's where the Japanese have excelled in. And they'll give you more functions than LG or the Finns, Nokia can do, I believe. But, the Koreans are bright. They are also picking up. I cannot predict how China will go, but I think she's going so far, I believe she's going on the right track, because she did not follow the Japanese and the Koreans in blocking out imports and trying to build champions for the motor cars, or for the TV screens, or for electronics. They copied the Singapore model, which was bring all the multinationals, let them compete amongst themselves. They use Singapore workers, Singapore engineers, Singapore managers, and eventually we become suppliers to these companies, and we can do the final product over time. So the Chinese have done likewise. Instead of protecting their car market and saying no to foreign manufacture, every auto manufacturing corporation in the world is in China, either alone or in joint ventures. And they have to employ Chinese engineers, Chinese designers, Chinese workmen. And it's only a matter, today they're producing a Chinese little car called a Cherry. In 20 years, they can produce you a Lexus or a BMW, or 30 years, a Mercedes. Because look at the numbers that they have who will be trained in their skills. So I think they have taken the smarter route. Open up. I learn from you. I catch up. Then I innovate and I compete with you. I think that's the way they have to go. So I really cannot say what the end result will be. The end result will be, are the Chinese as innovative, as creative as the Japanese, or the Finns, or the Americans? They have not won many Nobel prizes from scientists in China, but that's, I think, because they're not concentrated on R&D. Chinese Nobel Prize winners get their prizes when they are in America and join American establishments. But I do not believe that the Chinese people cannot begin to create the kind of institutions in universities and in research that will not produce such talent. I give you one illustration of why I think they got the numbers. I was watching CCTV 4 about the Chinese astronaut or cosmonaut. They started off choosing from 1,500 persons. 1,500 persons, and they trained them for months. Then after the final 4 months, they reduced it to 30 persons. Then the final 4 weeks, they reduced it to 4 persons. Then the last week they chose one. 1,500 to choose one. You tell me to find one astronaut in Singapore, can I produce you one? A person with the stamina, the guts, the lung capacity, the ability to overcome weightlessness and not get seasick. It can't produce. The Malaysians produce a doctor, not as an astronaut, but as a passenger who will go up and do experiments in medicine. He was a passenger. So, when I looked at that, I said, oh, it is of a different order of magnitude. If you have 13 billion people, you have choices which very few countries can equal. Maybe if you have if Israel were 100 million people, I think the Israelis may be able to compare with them. But there are only 4 million. But amongst the 4 million, they are all the survivors of many pogroms, and these are the brightest and the best. So, my answer is, the promise is there. Whether the promise will be fulfilled depends on how the leaders direct this creativity or allow this creativity and this innovation to flourish.
Is there a role for China to help to improve the world financial situation? In other words, for the gloom to lift earlier. Thank you.
To change the world financial system.
No, to improve the financial, yeah, because of the crisis.
Well, they have already expressed their views that you have to include the voices of the developing countries and so on, but I do not think the Chinese have enough of the background of how the financial system, the world financial system has been developed and managed over these last few centuries. It was largely a British and an American effort. First you had the British Pax Britannica for 200 years, and the pound sterling, and London was the center of finance in the world. Then after World War I, it gradually shifted to Washington or to New York. And after World War II, Bretton Woods was really settled by the British and the Americans, with John Maynard Keynes, who was a very brilliant economist on the British side, and Morgenthau on the American side. The Chinese have read up the history of all this, but to know the intricacies of the system, that's a different matter. And I think it will be a very difficult business to try and reframe a financial system anew, because you've got so many players now, all demanding a say. I mean, the Russians met, the finance ministers, Russian, China, Brazil, India, met in Sao Paulo and says, it's time the IMF and all these other organizations are changed and we must have a voice, as indeed they will have. But supposing we ask the four of them, you run the financial system, you put up your proposals. They can put up certain proposals where they think they want to have a say in it, but to structure the whole architecture, that's a different problem altogether. I mean, will it be a monocurrency with seigniorage of the US dollar? Will it be the US dollar? Will reserve currencies and trading currencies be in US dollars and in euros? Or in US dollars, euros, and renminbi? Or renminbi together with the yuan? So many combinations, and if the world is not careful, we will break up into regions Because Asia is already thinking. I mean, you have seen the three leaders of Japan, Korea, and China meeting in Japan to coordinate the economic policies to be the engine of the recovery of the world, which is not such an ambitious project because they are three very powerful dynamos. But if you start having a rescue plan, an Asian IMF, an Asian ADB, then you undermine the comprehensiveness of the international IMF. Is that good or bad? I'm not sure. Personally, I think this is one world, and you break it up into segments: Asia, Europe, America, Latin America, Africa, will be worse off because at the end of the day, it is one world and one trading system. If it breaks up into trading blocks, as it did after World War II, and then into the early years of World War II, I think that's a disaster for the world. Many of you are too young to remember, but before the war, you can buy a British car, British textiles, British goods cheaper than you can buy any others, because within the British Empire, they had imperial preference. And you captured colonies because then they are your markets and you exclude everybody else. Well, the same thing, if you do that in Asia, we form an Asian bloc. Then the Americans form a North American bloc. The South Americans form a South American bloc. Africans form their bloc. North Africa, one bloc. South Africa, one bloc. China, Japan, Korea, maybe an ASEAN, one bloc. Is that good? Because you've got to coordinate all these blocks. I think it's a very complex problem and it will have to be sorted out gradually.
Take a seat.